I'm Patrick Watson. I'm an astrologer, and you're watching Big Fat Astro Vlog live. I was a little late with my horoscopes this month, so I just figured I'd focus on the one thing that everyone's talking about and discuss it from the perspective of each rising sign, like my monthly horoscopes. So this is in effect taking place of a monthly horoscope. Let's do my fancy little intro. I have no idea if that worked or not. Sorry if that was really loud. Let's see. Let me just make sure that everyone is here or not. Let's see. I don't know if that. I'll say something. I'll say, hey. I'll try to. You can talk with me on YouTube if you like. There's a little chat bar there. So hopefully some of you are getting to watch this, but if not, anyway. So let's get started. So. Basically what's happening this month is Venus is stationing retrograde. It does this 5 times every 8 years, so it's actually the rarest of the planetary retrogrades. And all that means is it's making an apparent retrograde motion through the sky. It looks like it's going backwards due to the relative speeds of the Earth and Venus as they pass each other, because Venus comes between the Earth and the Sun. So Venus is typically known to be like the planet of romance and love and harmony and beauty and all of that kind of stuff. And when it's moving in a forward motion, the way it's supposed to go, or the way it normally goes most of the time, Venus is sort of acting as expected. Brings people together, it makes things nice, makes things pleasant. But when it's going retrograde, there's a very specific times when some of these ideas are expressed in less conventional ways. They can often be the markers of important relationships with people, but they can also be times of great scandal. That's probably one of the key things to expect from like Venus retrograde stuff. So obviously, if you look in the news right now, there's a lot of talk about sex crime, sexual assault, and that sort of thing, and that's sort of somewhat typical for Venus retrograde. It's the sort of Venus idea, but completely, distorted and awful, right? So, and part of that is also due to its square from Mars as well, which is sort of like more of the like violent aspect of it. But subverted or like distorted Venus themes is sort of a theme of Venus retrograde. So there's also a sense with Venus that there's like an orderliness or a kind of social propriety. It contains a sort of elements of like etiquette and what's socially proper to do. So oftentimes during Venus retrograde, these kinds of social norms or boundaries are kind of challenged or messed around with. It can also be, it's not just relevant on an individual level for like relationships and stuff, but it's also relevant on a more mundane level for like relationships between groups of people, whether that's like racial groups or whether that's religious groups or class groups. Oftentimes those sort of the ways in which we relate to each other, sometimes it's difficult to stay together, during this sort of Venus retrograde period. So right now, we're here today to talk about what this actually means for, like, you. So specifically as an Aries rising. What is this about? Well, we have to think about this in 2 different ways. Number one, we have to think about the fact that Venus in your chart, because you were born with Aries rising, that means that the signs, at least according to whole sign houses, are always going to have the same relationship to the ascendant. So that gives Venus a specific kind of role in your chart, generally, as an Aries rising. So the 2 signs which are ruled by Venus are Taurus and Libra. So on the one hand, Venus gives its natural significations of, what you consider sacred, what you consider beautiful or attractive, your general propensity towards like relationships or connecting with other people, or your general aesthetic sense. But it also takes on these more specific roles of the signs of Taurus and Libra and where they fall in your chart. So for you, with an Aries rising, Taurus is your 2nd house, which revolves around like your finances, your things, your possessions, things that you cherish and that are close to you. So, for most people, it's probably like their phone or their car or their computer, but it might also be like sentimental things, jewelry or, keepsakes, you know, it's your stuff. It's like the things that are an extension of you in, you know, your physical world around you. So Venus takes on that kind of role in your chart, but at the same time, it also takes on the role of the 7th house, because that's where Libra is, where you have Aries rising. So Venus is funny because Venus naturally takes on the significances for relationships, but with with Libra in the 7th, it's like a double confirmation. You know, Venus absolutely, you know, is in the part of your chart that has to do with partnerships and relationships and others. So any type of Venus transit that you get is going to be, you know, Venus is speaking for these issues in your chart. So where Venus falls in your chart, what sign Venus is in, as well as what phase you were born in, is going to kind of tell you a bit more about, you know, the way those topics are connected. So what we can also say is, with Venus transiting in your 8th, this is kind of the final component to this. So, you know, the ruler of your stuff and your money and your things, as well as the topics of your relationships and the way you connect to others, is currently going through and will be going retrograde through your 8th house, which is kind of an interesting house because it's the 8th house of death. It's kind of a shady house. It's also related to like your partner's finances, as well as kind of shady financial institutions. It's related to taxes. It's related to loans, in the, you know, the concept of others' money, in insurance, banks, that sort of thing. The sort of shady place where, like, you know, things can be kind of corrupt. So, I mean, anytime Venus goes through Scorpio, it's going to be kind of bringing up a little bit about these issues of, I mean, anytime planets go through your 8th house, it's going to kind of bring up some mode of interaction with this topic. And the topic of death, of course, relates to this because, more specifically, via like legacies or inheritances. Again, it's that notion of others' money. So with the ruler of your 2nd and the ruler of your 7th transiting through your 8th and going retrograde through your 8th, the way we'd have to interpret that is like circumstances involving your partner or your relationships or something, and your finances are tied up in some kind of scandalous or potentially corrupt kind of circumstance. It's difficult to obviously make that specific because this is true for, technically it's true for like millions of people, but it has something to do, has something to do with these topics all kind of intertwining. I mean, this could be a time when, you know, maybe your partner is making expenditures that like have relevance for your relationship together. Maybe maybe your money or their money is being put towards purposes which kind of threaten the relationship. I mean, for example, I'm just trying to think of like any scenario where this would make sense. For example, maybe you discover that your partner is like spending money on something that you didn't know they were spending money on, and maybe like you've talked about it and it's been like an issue before and it's kind of coming to the forefront again now. Like, you know, why do you have this secret account? Why, you know, it could, you know, that can lead to obviously some, you know, relationship problems then about like, you know, honesty, openness, you know, or maybe since Venus retrograde tends to be times where people kind of entertain the notion of being separate sometimes if they're already together. You know, this could be like social connections which, yeah, then cause them to spend money in certain ways that are indicative of like their mindset that they, you know, kind of entertaining, you know, what life would be like, you know, with someone else or something like that. I mean, it may not be exactly like that. I mean, it's going to be different for each person because obviously Venus is going to be making, you know, individual aspects in your natal chart. I mean, it's very, very difficult to kind of condense exactly what this will mean, but that's, at least we can tell that, you know, with Venus ruling your 2nd and Venus ruling your 7th house, that with Venus going retrograde through the sign of your 8th for the whole of October, basically, that this will be a major point of focus and contention. Like, what exactly is being joined together, and what is being spent on, and what is the value of what is being bought or sold or what have you, and like what is your what does this say about like your relationships, and what does it say about your relationship to the value of your stuff? I don't know. It's as you can see, it's complicated, but that's what this is supposed to mean, at least according to just sort of basic astrology. So, yeah. So that's about all I have to say about that. Let me see if I have any questions. It doesn't look like I have any questions right now. So, all right. Well, I will conclude that. Obviously, if you have any questions in the comments, I'll try to respond. And if you're having, if you have a story you'd like to share, you can share and show sort of how this has turned out for you, then awesome. Also, another thing you should know is Venus goes on an 8-year cycle. So Venus was retrograde in this part of the zodiac that it's going to be now. That it was 8 years prior in 2010, and 8 years prior in October to November of 2002, and before that, 1994. So, depending on how old you are, you can kind of go back and see if these themes kind of repeat in any sense from the 8-year period to 8-year period, especially if you have planets in Scorpio, or otherwise being aspected by this transit in Scorpio. So, again, let me know what happens. I'll be fascinated to hear what you have to say. And that's all I got. So, see you next time, and good luck with Venus Retrograde.